I'd like to introduce the chair of our first panel this morning, Matt Lecar. Matt is a principal consultant with GE Energy's Smart Grid Center of Excellence. Matt serves as GE's project manager for a U.S. Trade Development Agency funded study of smart grid best practice and the development of standards and regulation for the China Electric Power Research Institute. Matt has a master's from Harvard. He also has a degree from Berkeley. He worked at EDF, so many ties with this conference. What's strange is that he doesn't have a degree from École Polytechnique. Please help me welcome Matt.
Thank you. Should I put this? And then this. Hi, everyone. Bonjour à tous. And happy Election Day. I hope for those of you who are registered in this state that you chose to vote. So just first of all, thank you, Don, for setting up the whole description. I wasn't sure that we were going to have a definition of smart grid, but that saves me a lot of time. Obviously, this is an expert audience, so I don't need to dwell on some of the generalities. I thought I would try and kind of center this discussion that we're going to have in a broader context, which is the smart city, sustainable city movement, which we see globally, of which power is an essential but limited component. So really, the smart city movement is about the intersection of all of the different networked infrastructures that impact urban dwellers. So you have a combination of transportation, air, water, communications, all coming together in the dense population centers. I apologize, some of these pictures are a little fuzzy. It's because they were all taken with my smartphone in the last year or so. But it shows you what smart grid or smart city looks like in different places. So on the far right, the most recent picture, I was in Sao Paulo last month, which has some of the worst traffic in the world. And I'm an urban bicyclist in San Francisco. I bike commute everywhere, up and down hills. I scarcely saw a bicycle the whole time I was in Sao Paulo, except when I went to the public park on the weekend, and then everybody was on bicycles. What that shows you is that the challenge isn't ownership or ridership of bicycles. The challenge is the infrastructure. You have, vehicle lanes that are too small, that are scary, cultural things like crazy motorcyclists who dart in and out of traffic. They say, 3 or 4 of them get killed every day. The traffic in Sao Paulo is terrible. And clearly, as they think about the World Cup and the Olympics that are coming in the next few years, one of the big infrastructure investments will be improving mass transit, improving the transportation infrastructure. That actually has major impacts on the electric infrastructure. So there are clear synergies and overlaps between these different components. And we can think about smart traffic management. Well, once you've got sensor networks in place and camera networks in place for smart traffic management, you can use them to detect outages on the electric system. You can use them to communicate event information. When you've got congestion on the electric system, maybe you want to slow down the influx of traffic into an area. Who knows? The middle picture is Shanghai, a city which, if you haven't visited it, is clearly sort of having its moment on the world stage. I actually took this picture from my 79th floor hotel lobby. I think the hotel goes up another 10 floors or so from there. And of course, you can see the air pollution, which is terrible in all the Chinese cities. Slightly better in Shanghai than in Beijing. But the funny part about Shanghai is this whole Pudong area where all the high-rise skyscrapers are is new. 10 years ago, none of it existed. Today, I'm standing in this hotel, which they tell me is, was until the previous year the tallest building in Shanghai. You can't see it, but off to what would be your left in that picture is a new building that's 10 stories taller. We called it the bottle opener because it has this big square hole in the top. There's a whole story about that. But then next to that is a big hole in the ground where they're constructing, a 110-story building that will be the tallest building next year. So how do you accommodate that kind of incredibly rapid growth with all of the environmental issues that they already have and the power needs of this very dense urban agglomeration around Shanghai. And the picture on the left, kind of shows you what smart grid means, I think, to most California consumers and kind of the vision we have here in the US of integrating all the new cool technology that consumers want to integrate. Electric plug-in vehicles, I don't know if you can see that well, but there's a row of about 10 Nissan Leafs here in front of San Diego Gas and Electric's headquarters, all of them plugged into chargers. Now, this is another example of how these different infrastructures compete and combine. Look how this pedestrian walkway that you would need to walk down to get to any of these vehicles is now blocked by a bunch of cables. Right? That's poor design from an accessibility standpoint. Imagine if you were a wheelchair-bound person trying to get to your car, and this whole access lane was blocked. So there's a lot of overlap between these infrastructures. So I guess that's the point I'm trying to make here. One of the things I always caution people is nobody's in favor of the dumb grid, right? Smart is just this label that we can throw in front of anything and make it sound like, of course, it's a positive, of course it's desirable. And to the question that was raised a minute ago, really we have to demonstrate value. We have to show how the investments, some of them very large investments in communications and control infrastructure, are merited on the basis of the value they deliver to consumers, the value they deliver to society. My dad used to joke, you always see these neon signs that draw you into a coffee shop that say, hot, fresh coffee. Who sells cold coffee? Right? I mean, iced coffee on a hot day, okay, but, presumably anybody who's in the business of selling coffee offers hot, fresh coffee. But the fact that you put the word hot on there somehow triggers these emotional responses. I think the smart and smart grid has some of that unfortunate word magic, as I call it. So I've covered a little bit of this already. Just to put it in context, I think it's hard to talk about resilience of infrastructure right now without thinking of Hurricane Sandy. So we still have 1 million customers in the Northeast without power, people whose lives have been absolutely devastated, whole neighborhoods that will have to be demolished in New Jersey and some of the islands, Staten Island, Long Island. And that's a tragedy. So part of the driver for investment in smart infrastructure, be it electric or communications or transportation, is to help us both prevent but primarily recover from catastrophic incidents. I mean, I can't think of a smart grid investment anyway that will prevent the next Hurricane Sandy, although we can talk about climate change and its role. But I can certainly think of a lot of smart grid investments that can help bring some of those 1 million customers back into service faster and restore some sense of normalcy. And we can also talk about specific investments in event response, which I think an under-discussed element. So think about portable power and the ability to bring in a trailerized, containerized solar power plant, stick it in a neighborhood like this, and plug it into the grid and synchronize it with the grid. Because most of these lines, even though there's damaged infrastructure everywhere, actually the medium voltage lines are probably in decent shape. A lot of the poles are bent. A lot of the secondary circuits to people's homes may be down. But if you can restore service to a neighborhood, right? You can have a neighborhood charging center where people can bring in their cell phones and get some of those essential services back. That also, provides resilience, restores a sense of normalcy. So I think that's something we can start to integrate into some of this planning. So some of the factors, globally, I think the biggest factor, and I showed the pictures of Shanghai and Sao Paulo, and clearly the world's urban centers are growing and growing much more rapidly than general population or economic growth. And we have to think about how energy infrastructure plays in these megacities that are popping up all over the world. I mean, there are, I forget the figure now, something like 100 cities of 1 million or more people in China. I can't name more than 12, and I've been over there 5 times in the last year. So, for most of us in the developed world, this is a shocking phenomenon, how many people now live in megacities. In fact, they don't even call it a city in China unless it has 1 million or more people. Below that is a town. Right? San Francisco would be a town in China. At least the city of San Francisco. Now, I wanted to put up a positive image as well. This is UC San Diego, part of our UC system. By the way, Don is wearing a red tie. That's a no-no in Berkeley. You should know that he came from Palo Alto today. At least I don't think it has to do with his political leanings. I suspect it has to do more with where he came from. But go Bears. But UC San Diego, again, part of the public UC system, has a microgrid. The entire campus, 53 megawatts, is self-serving for its electrical needs. And a lot of it is generated with solar. This is one of their electric vehicle charging, carport, rooftop solar facilities. Pretty impressive. So, a big driver in terms of smart grid is the integration of more renewable energy, more variable renewable energy. So solar, not only is it not available at night, but I think there's a growing realization it's quite problematic for the grid to integrate a high penetration of solar energy, which has the following characteristic. When a cloud bank passes over this megawatt of generation, it all drops off the grid within a millisecond. So it has ramping characteristics and unpredictability that are very different even from wind. In fact, solar is in some ways more problematic than wind to integrate into the grid. So we need a grid that is more robust, more resilient. So when we talk about smart grid, and Don defined it for me, so again, I'm just going to stay at a fairly high level. Bear in mind, this isn't IT. We're talking about infrastructure. We're talking about a very capital-intensive industry where we build assets that last 30 to 50 years, typically, not longer. And there's no plug and play. You can't sort of pull a piece of shrink-wrapped software off a store shelf, plug it in to your utility, and say, I have smart grid today. Right? It's a custom-built evolution of the electromechanical grid that we have today that provides a higher degree of resiliency, higher ability to integrate all of these new services, new technologies, and is more resilient to unexpected events and attacks. That's the goal. The challenge is, how do we measure the value of that? So my time is up. I'm going to hand it off to the next person. But I just wanted to suggest to you, we at GE, even as big as GE is, I think number 5 on the Fortune list, 300,000 employees, even bigger than EDF, which I used to work for. We have bits and pieces. We have a number of hardware elements that we sell out of our catalog. We have trouble seeing the forest for the trees. So smart grid itself is a solution that is woven together out of this toolkit of new generation and controls, new distribution monitoring and control, back-end enterprise software that allows the utility, as Don said, to visualize what's going on better and predict and analyze events as they happen. But even as broad as that basket is, we struggle as GE to deliver a turnkey smart grid solution to a customer. And now, as we get into smart city, we're being asked for a turnkey electric, transportation, water, waste, management, everything. That is bigger than GE can provide. It's bigger than Siemens can provide. It's bigger than anybody can provide. So we're getting into new partnerships that are multidisciplinary, multi-industry, with major global players working together to figure out these extremely challenging problems. So I think that's fascinating. I think it's a great place to be, and that's, I hope, a positive message to end on. And let me hand off. So Gabrielle, what's the order you want to do this in? We have each of our 3 panelists. So we're going to start with Bérangère. So you all have... Oh, you're driving. Great.